All right. Good evening, everyone. It's Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. Today we have a very, very interesting discussion that's part of one of the things that we've been talking about for a long time about the environment. Just to give you guys a heads up, and I'll bring Jim in shortly. Jim, I'll bring you in shortly. Let me just take everyone to what we've been talking about for many years. But if people go to the Shiva for President website, one of the things you'll see is in the download section here, we talk about this fundamental issue that those in power are basically killing our children, that the lifespan of the average child today in the United States is going to be less or is less than their parents. And this has been going on since 1980. It's not any one issue. It's not the vaccines. It's not just any one thing. And we need a systems overhaul. So we've been talking about that, and all of you can go to Shiva for President, download this flyer to educate your people that your child's lifespan is going to be shorter than yours. And then we discuss who the swarm is. As a part of that, we've been doing every Thursdays open town halls on healthcare, on environment, on education, on innovation, governance, and economy. And John, you may just want to put that up. Everyone's welcome to come there to shivaforpresident.com/town hall to participate in those town halls. But one of the things we focus on the environment, and we've been really educating people on why we need to support local farming, to eat locally and healthy, and how to do that on a budget. As a part of that discourse, we want to bring in one of our guests here. Let me bring in Jim. Where's Jim? So we want to bring in Jim. Jim, you're out of Florida, right, Jim?
Yes, Central Florida in St. Cloud, about 45 minutes from the Orlando International Airport.
Yeah, so many, many years ago, Jim, I did a whole discussion. We did some of the earliest work on genetically engineered food, some of the fundamental research showing at the systems level how GE foods are not substantially equivalent to organic foods. The GE makers try to put forward the idea that genetically engineered foods are the same. And the entire goal of the GMO centralized big ag movement has been to essentially put out small farmers and to essentially destroy the supply chain of food locally. Now, permaculture is what traditional systems of agriculture are all about. You integrated many, many local things. Like when I grew up in our village, Jim, my great grandfather, the manure from the cows he would take into the rice paddies, right? It was a common thing. And then you had all these subsystems, right? Animals, chickens, everything that worked together. And then you rotated crops. So these are traditional systems of agriculture, and we've lost them. So when I spoke to Mike and forget the other gentleman's name, Todd, he said, you were essentially recreating this with permaculture in Florida. So perhaps you should talk about that, Jim, and we can have a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Shiva. I'm going to start out by sharing with you what I shared with Bobby Kennedy about 4 weeks ago. I said, what has been shared with me through a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer, and a lot of obsession with the question, how do we bring peace on earth? How do we actually change the world? A campaign strategy has been shared with me that will not only win the election, whether it be the election that's controlled by the governmente is not the point, but the election by the people. And it will create a new economy, a parallel economy better than the existing, completely ridiculous economy. And we won't even call it mind control anymore. We'll maybe call it, instead of governmente, we'll call it empowermente, right? And it'll be based in voluntarism. And when Victor Hugo said there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come, this is it. The idea is the opposite of government. It's enlightenment. It's awareness. Awareness, as you know, and as you talk about, is key to transition, because without awareness, there can be no key, or there can be no transition. So what we are creating around the world is demonstration sites that demonstrate the power of nature, or, because I grew up in Minnesota, I call it God, right? This incredible wellspring of life. So we demonstrate God's design or nature, and we also demonstrate non-compliance with tyranny on every conceivable level. We did not ask for permission to build these houses. This is my lifetime family home made of 3D printed steel, which is recycled. So our intent is to recycle the military industrial complex to inspire and empower mass adoption of simply using our resources wisely, taking out the poisons and using our resources wisely. And I'll get into the details on your show here. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, one thing you have to understand, Jim, is Booby Kennedy, as I call him, is not a friend of agriculture. He talks a big game. And I know that Todd said he came and did some photo ops, but you got to understand he endorsed Hillary Clinton not once, not twice, 3 times. Okay? Yeah. Who's pro Monsanto, pro glyphosate, etc. So people need to understand that. I hope you're not promoting him because he's part of the problem, because he uses people like you and others for photo opportunities. But at the end of the day, I just want to make this clear because, you know, for me, this has been a lifelong journey because I grew up with my grandparents who are, you know, subsistence farmers. And these people talk a good game, but you cannot be saying you're supporting local farmers and taking pictures and then be endorsing Hillary Clinton 3 times.
I couldn't agree more.
So,
and
it's a framework that he's been doing. He goes down to different people who are actually doing the work, gets photo ops with them when he just uses and exploits those people, plagiarizes their stuff. So I think this is important to understand because we live in a world of deception.
Yes, we do.
People know that the world is, people are getting tired of these people. And these people, like the devil, come in and make people think they are for real sustainable agriculture or real medical freedom, any of those things. But ultimately, you find out that in his case, he's a Zionist. He's a rabid Zionist. He supported Hillary Clinton again. I remember in we did a movie called Poisoning Paradise. Okay, and he talked a good game, but he endorsed Hillary Clinton. Okay, who brought in Monsanto's #1 person to run his movement. So I just want to be clear that any type of credit to this guy is actually dangerous because he uses this to manipulate people. So let's just sort of level set there.
Yeah, anyway. And thank you, Dr. Shiva, for pointing that out. And I always go there. I am advocating one thing. I'm advocating the solution to all of the world's biggest problems, and including mass extinction and deforestation, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, world hunger, and tyranny. When we take out the fear and scarcity, then the people can no longer be controlled. So when I make public statements and put names in like that, what happens, I've recognized, is more people hear the message because, as you've been talking about for a long time, this is not about government solving our problems. This is about the individuals and the families and the communities coming together to solve our problems. So that's, and I'm excited to share with you the tactics that we are employing. So when a politician, and I know that you're not a politician, but I'm just using that term. But when somebody with a platform says something like, I am going to reduce crime by 50% in the next 4 years, most people would say, you're effing crazy. There's no way you could do that. And then the media is going to go out. And then here's the facts of the matter. When the inmates in our prison system, who are mostly sick and they're fed poisonous foods and they're mentally and physically ill, when they grow their own food and learn permaculture, the recidivism rates in programs that have already been proven to work goes down by more than 50%. It's epically powerful. And that's one campaign stop. So, and we've got prisons that we're connected with that want to put food for us in. And then now let's go to the schools, right? You go to the schools and imagine the claim, I am going to reverse the trend of childhood diabetes. I'm going to reverse the trend of childhood suicide and depression and big pharma, poison drug use. And we're going to turn every school into a permaculture paradise where the students not only learn the ethics of permaculture, but they also practice growing their own food. And boom, and this has been done. So anyway, I'll keep going with two more. If you want me to do it now or you want to interject, please do.
Yeah, what I think will be good, Jim, is let's talk about the methodology so we can get a little bit jump in, because a lot of our people already know some of the larger points we're making. Let's talk about this whole area of growing food locally, the economics of that, and what you have. For me, you know, when you looked at traditional systems of agriculture, they were already based on this before, you know, they were subjugated and manipulated, right?
Yes.
And people in local, if you go to our, you know, a small village in South India, even today, right? You can see I mean, India was 87% agriculture, right? Villages.
Yeah.
So if we just sort of go back to the 1600s, there was no, it's very interesting statistically, there was no landless peasantry in India.
Right.
For that matter, there was no poverty in India, except for leper colonies. So I want everyone to understand the level set. And at that time, 98% of India was agrarian, small cellular villages. There were close, you know, hundreds of thousands of villages which communicated among each other, and they were called village communities.
Yeah.
And those village communities, it was essentially the permaculture model was embedded in there.
Yep.
When colonialism took place, all those villages started getting wiped out. So today, the same farm my grandparents used to run, very small farm, you know, because they were consistent farmers. Some of those farms have been destroyed by leather factories upstream, which have poisoned the water, you say, downstream.
Yes.
So this is happening globally, the concept of the small farmer attempting to do permaculture, you know, doing these things with, you know, when they crop, they would only pick certain vegetables at certain times of the day, right?
Yeah.
Basil was picked at certain times of the, you know, they had all these very, very specific things. So I want to, first of all, recognize traditional systems of agriculture had figured all this out. And we're essentially trying to go full circle, but we're trying to do it in a world now where big ag is running everything, and the intellectual property methodologies are being used to basically snuff out the small guys. So in that context, Jim, maybe you can just first of all explain to people what is permaculture.
Okay, permaculture starts with the ethics, the very simple ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. But sharing is not done at the point of a gun. Sharing is a voluntary act. So that's what permaculture is all about. Earth care, people care, and reinvesting our surplus wisely. And I want to reiterate something you just said. Henry Kissinger, 50 years ago, as you know, this is all by design. Henry Kissinger said, if you want to control people, control food. That wasn't just the ramblings of a psychopath. That was the strategy spoken to the world about what their intentions are. So permaculture is literally the path to freedom when we take the poisons out. And this is what I've been obsessed with now for 16, 17 years, is asking the question, how do we achieve mass adoption? Because either we achieve mass adoption or we're done. And it'll start by doing exactly what we're demonstrating here. We've created, and by the way, 21 months ago, there was nothing here but sand. So we started intentionally with the worst possible conditions, Florida, sand. Now we have an epic food forest that has 240 different species of edible and medicinal plants, and beehives and ducks and chickens and cows. And the key to this is less maintenance than a lawn. So a lawn takes quite a bit more maintenance than this food forest. Right now, I can walk outside my house any time of year. And the good news is this can happen in Minnesota, Alaska, Russia. It doesn't matter where we are in the world. The permaculture principles and ethics apply to every zone. We can turn deserts into green zones again. It takes more time, of course, but by applying these principles, we can do so. And you asked about the economies of scale, right? And this is something like people say money doesn't grow on trees. Well, fiat doesn't grow on trees, but wealth grows on trees, right? You can count the seeds in one of these papayas, but you can't count the papayas in one of the seeds. It's infinite.
Yeah. So Jim, I have the quote from Henry Kissinger. I remember in the 1980s, I was reading this. He said, who controls food supply controls the people, who controls energy can control whole continents, and who controls money can control the world. But if you want to control people, you control the food supply. This is why the destruction that started taking place sort of 300 years with colonialism has progressed into even the imperial countries doing it to its own people. But I think permaculture, I think there's the meta description. Let's get into sort of, no pun intended, a little more in the weeds.
Love it.
And describe permaculture, from an agricultural system standpoint, so people understand, Jim, on how you grow these things together. If you can get into the weeds in terms of the mechanics of how you have, farm animals, how they do their own burrowing, how they, if you can just assume you're talking to a 2-year-old and just talk about permaculture from the little more at the 1 foot level, what happens literally on the ground in the soil.
I love it. I want to talk. I will actually show you. So we're about demonstrating freedom. So this is we call this our permaculture pathway. This plant right here is called perennial peanut. And this not only creates a ground cover that's beautiful, and most of the year it has these beautiful yellow flowers that are edible, but it also is a nitrogen fixer. So permaculture is a design science. It's an agricultural design science. So we design the land and we put guilds together. A guild is a community of plants that support each other. So we've got the nitrogen fixers, we've got the beneficial insect attractors, the pollinator attractors, we've got the chop and drop plants like Mexican sunflower and many more that actually build soil, and comfrey and many more. And then we've got the edible plants. So this is a guild. And again, with a guild, if we walked away from this system now and we came back in 30 years and we didn't have a climactic event, or we didn't have anybody come and poison it or chop it down, in 30 years, this system would literally expand hundreds of miles.
So Jim, let me just take people. So in a guild, you have these different communities of plants, right, that work together. So just take us once again, just summarize, what are those communities of plants? One is the nitrogen fixers, right? Like the peanut. The second one is what?
The beneficial insect attractors, like flowers.
Right. So the things that attract insects. So one is fixing nitrogen. Another one is attracting the insects. And what's an example of that plant? The flowering plant.
Okay, so these flowers, all the different flowering plants. One of my favorites is the monarch, the milkweed that attracts loads of monarchs. Yeah.
Okay.
But diversity is the key to strength. Right. Yeah.
But Jim, you have the nitrogen fixers, the flowering plants that attract the insects. What's the third one, Jim, as part of the guild?
And the food producing plants. So, and then we also have the dynamic accumulators. So a dynamic accumulator is a plant like comfrey or moringa. We've got loads of moringa here and comfrey, and those plants dig their root systems down, and then they bring up the nutrients. They convert things to nutrient and beneficial nutrients that then can be used by the other plants.
Right. So you have the nitrogen fixers, the flowering plants, the things that provide nutrients to the other plant like moringa. And what's the fourth one, Jim?
Dynamic accumulators.
And what's an example of that, Jim?
Comfrey, moringa, Mexican sunflower.
Right. So that's the third one, the dynamic accumulators and nitrogen fixtures of flowering. What's the fourth one? Wasn't there a fourth one?
The food producers, the different food and medicine producers.
Right. So that would be like the papaya, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So what's interesting, Jim, is in India, the earliest memory I have is outside my grandparents' home. Maybe you can take people to look at what a moringa plant looks like. Can you walk over there? Yeah, there's moringa. So that's, by the way, Jim, a Tamil word, okay? Moringa. And so you can eat those leaves, very, very healthy. They have, for women, even the World Health Organization said moringa is basically the tree of life that it can solve pretty much any problem, particularly for women. It has all the nutrients. It's got full profiles of every amino acid. The moringa plant, do you have anyone with a fruit on it, Jim? They also have this very long fruit.
Yes, we do. Look at that, it's loaded. Can you see that?
So it's great. So everyone see that. So it's an amazing plant. Those fruits in India, Jim, we take those and we make in a particular soup, and they're known for increasing testosterone, okay, in men. So in Indian movies, there we go. And maybe you can, I don't know, I don't want you to hurt the plant if you're going to use it, Jim, but it has seeds in there, right? You can open it up. Yeah, there you go. And so you can make a really nice soup of that. If you go to a South Indian restaurant, you'll find that they make it. And in Indian movies, Jim, they would say if a husband and wife got married, and if the wife wanted to, make sure her husband took care of her at night, she would make him the moringa soup, okay? Which comes from that plant. So we call them drumsticks. The leaves you can eat raw or you can roast, right, in a little bit of ghee, and it's very, very healthy for all sorts of things. But so basically, Jim, you're saying there's these 4 particular gills in the plants: the food-producing plants, the dynamic accumulators, the nitrogen fixers, and then the flowering. And once you put those together, they create their own ecosystem, and they'll keep just growing by themselves. They'll create their own forest.
That's exactly right. They'll keep getting more exponentially productive over time. And there's some magic that happens with nature. For like in a lot of citrus, when they're ready to eat, you pick them and you eat them. And if you don't eat them, the plant will produce fewer oranges or citrus the next year. So there's some kind of magical divine interaction between these systems and the people who steward them.
Yeah, there's a whole book that was written by J.C. Bose called The Secret Life of Plants. If people haven't seen it, and the plants actually can feel when people come to them and communicate with them. But moringa is an amazing plant, It's one of the traditional plants. The leaves are good. The fruits are good. It's just a very powerful plant. It also has arginine in it. That, the Russian Olympic athletes have been using moringa for many, many years for, anabolic effects versus taking steroids and things like that. So, Jim, those are the 4 pieces, right? What else? Now go to the next layer beyond the plants when you introduce some of the livestock and the animals.
So people ask all the time, what about insects? We love insects. We have not had any insect problems. We've actually released beneficial insects. We've released ladybugs and praying mantis and other insects here in the system. We're even releasing snakes into the system, like black racers and other snakes, because I've got 4-year-old kids and dogs and stuff running around, and I don't want to see any rattlesnakes around the house. So we release the snakes that eat those snakes. So Bill Mollison famously said, you don't have a snail problem, you have a duck deficiency. So we use nature to balance out nature. Yeah,
very cool. It's like using food as medicine, right? Here you're combining these. It's basically this alchemy of using natural elements. So you have these 4 plants in the guild, and the animals. What do you have there right now? You release particular insects. Now in Florida, many years ago, we got called by an organization which was having all these problems with oranges. I forget what it was. Was it
a blight?
Now, why does that occur there, Jim, and why will that not occur here?
So I know it has to do with the poisons, the toxins that they use in the system. Everything stems from the toxins that they're spraying in our skies, in our soil, in our water, in our land, and especially the toxin of fear that they're injecting into the minds of the ignorant. So that's my basic answer, and I don't have a deeper answer than that.
Well, Jim, one of the things I've talked about is, as above, so below. So in traditional medicines, they have the concept of the earth element. So in Chinese medicine, the earth element, they have a 5-element theory, relates to the stomach. We now know that our own earth element, and you have the physical earth element where you are right now, what you're standing on. But in human beings, we also have the earth element, which is the stomach, the gut. And when the gut is poisoned, right, and the soil organisms in our own gut are poisoned, you start having all sorts of diseases, the gut-brain axis. And from a system standpoint, when you destroy the soil, which is what a lot of these pesticides and all of these unnatural things like GMOs and the glyphosate do, you're perturbing the entire soil.
Yeah.
And it goes, and then therefore the soil root loses its ability to have its natural defenders. And this is what happens to people. A lot of the people have immune deficiencies. It really starts with the gut, the earth element.
Yep. You're exactly right. The soil is a lot like almost exactly like the immune system. When we build healthy soil and the poisons come in, the soil eats up the poisons and shits out nutrients when it's healthy. But the more toxins, the more it's depleted, the more it loses its ability to function like the immune system. And so building soil is so important. So here's the thing. Take out the poisons. So I've created a campaign with bringing in all sorts of influencers that when we come together and we call out the corporations that are selling things like glyphosate, when we tell Home Depot, say, Home Depot, we've got an offer for you. We would like you to sell life instead of death. Now we're saying it that way, as you know. I've got a master's in neurolinguistics. We say it that way because the presupposition of that statement is very powerful. And so we'll help you sell compost tea and worm castings and things that provide life instead of the things that you're currently selling, like glyphosate. They've paid $11 billion in fines for harming and killing people and systems. So why don't you do this? When we call out all the corporations that are selling these poisons in that strategic way, the people will become aware. And then the people will choose to compost their fiat, right? Fiat is shit. It is going to hell. And so let's turn that fiat, which is that stored energy system, into life again. And every single fruit tree that I've purchased here has at least doubled in value in 12 months. Where else can we get that kind of ROI?
So Jim, where you are right here, what part of Florida are you in right now?
We are in St. Cloud, Florida. Have you heard of the book Atlas Shrugged?
Yeah, written by Ayn Rand.
So, we're at Galt's Landing in St. Cloud, Florida. We're on a private 430-acre lake. We've got a mile-long paved runway to our east, and it's at the end of the road. And the intention of Galt's Landing is to bring in the world leaders who we love and respect to have meetings here about freedom. And so this is where it gets really tactical. Because of this system, we have inspired many millions of dollars worth of development with a company called New Energy World, and they're the ones that build the steel frame houses. And we're bringing together all of the components of a parallel economy to come together and demonstrate the solutions and then turn that fiat into the new economy. So I would love for you to come visit sometime soon.
Yeah. So Jim, how many acres is there right now that you're on?
We're on a long, skinny 51 acres. We've got about 3,000 feet of lake frontage on this private lake.
And on those 51 acres, is all of it with these four elements in the guild and or is only a portion of it? What portion of it is?
Right now it's a portion of it, but it's going to be all of it. Like we literally just started 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago.
Yeah. So what portion is right? 10%, 20%? What portion?
I would say 25% right now is fairly well covered with permaculture design.
So that's about 10 acres? 15 acres?
And yes, including a 4-acre pond that has 7 different species of fish in it. And we use the water from the pond on a solar timer to fertigate, which means to fertilize and irrigate the food forest.
And let me ask you, so the products that are produced on there, what happens now? Is it leased to someone to come get the fruits, or what happens? Or is it just grow? Are people using it? Yeah.
Right now in this baby food forest, we have massive amounts of excess, but we're not to market yet, but we will be very soon. We're just starting to be at the point now where we can feed everybody in the community everything they need to thrive. And very soon we'll have such excess that we're creating a school, by the way, on site a school with 25 students that the students learn and practice permaculture along with the basics, and the school makes money because the students manage the greenhouse, and the students actually are going to be teaching the community how to create these systems. So it'll be the first self-funding school that I'm aware of model. And by the way, everything we do is open source. I have 4 daughters, and it is our duty to do this because, as you know, it's like time is of the essence. So we are open sourcing everything. Anybody can copy our model, but we found out that it's much better to collaborate rather than to compete. And like you said earlier, it's good versus evil. This is not a war between squabbling houses. This is a war between the living and the dead. So we're showing what the living can do, and then we're scaling it globally as fast as possible.
So, Jim, what you have there, it's in a semi-tropical environment, right? Florida.
Yeah, 9B.
Now, right. So if someone wanted to, so, you know, I'm in a town called Belmont, Massachusetts. This was known as the #1, most number of greenhouses in the world. Every home here used to have a greenhouse at some point. Yeah. And if you drive in, it says, it's called the Tree City. It's very interesting. So when I was looking for homes here, nearly every other home I saw had a greenhouse attached.
Yeah.
So this permaculture model, what is a minimum land, or from a Michelle? Yep. Yeah. What is a minimum amount of land? Can this be executed what's the minimum amount of land that can be done in a greenhouse?
So, okay.
Yeah.
So you see that this circle here is about 20 feet in diameter. On this circle, you could have 3 primary fruit and nut trees, and you could have 30 or 40 different raspberries and blueberries and blackberries and Cuban oregano and basil and all sorts of other plants in this little area.
What's the radius of that? What's the radius of that, Jim?
This is about 20 to 22 feet in diameter.
So 22 feet in diameter. So pi r squared is what? 11 times 11, 121 times, let's say, 3.
121. Yeah.
So about 750 square feet.
So 360.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
And about 750 square feet, you can grow 3 fruit and nut trees, right?
Yeah.
What else, Jim? What else
you
did
could
you say?
have so permaculture has layers. So you've got the roots and tubers layer, which is sweet potatoes and turmeric and ginger and many more. And then you've got the herbaceous layer, which is a lot of mushrooms and medicinals. And then you've got the shorter shrubs and the taller shrubs. So you could literally stack it from underground all the way up to the vining plants that go up the overstory fruit trees. And you could have 40 different species there. And
then, so that would generate fruits, nuts. You have your tubers, right? Your turmeric.
Yeah.
So you got your medicinal plants. Now let's talk about, let's say, now do you eat meat, Jim?
Yes.
So now where in that 750 square feet, you're not talking about, were there chickens there? Because part of permaculture is there, farrowing and worms and all. Will that happen in that? Can you do that in that 750 square feet?
You could have 2 chickens in that area in a little chicken house and let them roam every day. And those would produce you 2 eggs a day, which is a lot of extra food.
Right. So you got 2. So that's your protein source if you don't kill the chickens.
Yeah.
And then what about goats, Jim?
We have about 11 cows, 2 different species. We have 4 ducks. We have about 30 chickens. We have bees. We just got 2 new bee boxes today. We don't have goats yet, but we're going to get them eventually.
So that's in that 15 acres, right? Or that 15 acres.
Our property is bordered by the cattle pasture. So the cattle pasture goes all along the edge of the property. Yeah.
So Jim, how many people can the current 15 acres feed? Not with meat protein, right? But with eggs and herbs and fruits. It can't really feed. Let's keep the beef out of it. How many people can it feed right now? So if you,
Can we include the fish? Because the fish
let's say, so you have fish. So from a protein source, fish, eggs, tubers, right? Fruits, honey, right? How many people can that feed from the 15 acres you have?
if we had to, if like an EMP hit tomorrow, we all got, we had to eat right off here, we could feed 20 people everything they need to thrive, right? Even moringa, this has more protein than an egg by weight in the leaves of this tree.
Right. So you could feed 20 people, which is basically, let's say, like 4 families, something like that. Could live on that 15 acres, right? Is that right? So it's basically about 5 acres per family.
Okay, so right now this is a baby food forest. So there are many people who are living on a 1/4 acre with a full family, and they're feeding themselves everything they need on a 1/4 acre.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, when you say it's a baby forest, it hasn't fully matured, right, into its full scope. Right. So when it fully matures, Jim, how long does that take?
Well, this year it's 5 times as big as it was 12 months ago in a lot of areas. So within another 2 years, you won't even be able to see from here to the forest over there. It'll just be a jungle of food.
Right. Right. So at that point, the density of food production will be much higher. You could feed 10 times more people, probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now, I do want to share one other big point. We have about 47 million acres of lawn in the United States alone. The lawn takes more poisons, more human resources. The lawn is the physical foundation of humanity's enslavement. Right? It's insane. It's a strategy of control. So if anybody out there listening has a lawn, let's start putting food in that lawn. Sweet potatoes. I mean, one of the best preparedness crops that I know of is sweet potatoes. You can eat the leaves, the stems, and the tubers, and this is no maintenance. You just stick that stuff in the ground if you got decent soil, and it'll just produce massive amounts. And here's the kicker. It's also so easy to propagate, because I talked about this with my team all the time. Food security is when our neighbors have food as well as us. If we're the only ones with food during the coming food supply chain collapse, then we're going to have an army to protect our food. So instead, let's help everybody eat. So we propagate the easiest things to propagate, and we give them or sell them to our community, so then everybody's better off.
So Jim, let's talk about the Northeast, okay? Let's talk about another model, okay? Obviously, it's not one size fits all. If you're living in, let me take an extreme. If you're living in among the Eskimos, okay? Right now, they're not going to be able to do this, right?
Correct.
They're going to eat whale, they're going to eat walrus or whale, or they're going to need these high fatty diets because of the environment they live in, right?
Yeah.
That's a different kind of quote unquote permaculture, right? If you're
100%.
living right. So I think this needs to be understood, because when we talk about from a systems perspective, sometimes people broadly apply one size fits all everywhere, and that needs to also be taken into account.
Yeah, I use that exact analogy. Permaculture is a design science. So we start with, what do you got, right? What are you starting with? If you're in the tundra and you have, then your permaculture design is going to be to design the landscape in order to attract the food that you want to eat, right? Because you can't grow bananas in the tundra. Right? So you might plant several types of foods that the animals eat, and then you'd create storage methods, right? And by the way, the Eskimos they've always done this, as you know. So if somebody was going to move up there, the first thing they should bring is a permaculture handbook on what the Eskimos already do, and just copy that structure.
Yeah, like the Lappies in Finland, they rely on berries. They have a whole bunch of different berries. They rely on reindeer meat, right? They rely on a variety of different things. Now you take it to a desert, right? The people who are living, let's say, in some parts of very, very arid cultures, they obviously are going to live on different things, cacti, right? Different kinds of things in that environment. So,
deserts are easier than the tundra from my study.
Yeah.
We could take a desert, and over time, we could turn it into a food forest jungle. It's the key is catching and storing water. And there's a lot of videos online, like Greening the Deserts of Jordan, where they've taken and dug in big swales, and it might only rain once every 2 years, because the forests are what create the rain, right? Transpiration, a big tree in the jungle will transpire hundreds of gallons of water per day times millions of trees. So the trees create the rainforest in the forest, or the rain in the forest. So we'd start by catching and storing water, sinking it, slowing it, and spreading it. And then over time, after a few years, then you put your pioneering plants. The pioneering plants are key, right? Because they are hardy and they can handle the dryness better than the other plants. And then once you've got the system established, then you add your more sensitive plants, because now there's an ecosystem created.
Jim, let me ask you something. There have been people who've been promoting these sort of greenhouse solutions, right? I don't know if you've seen this, where you buy a greenhouse, they give you everything to grow in it. Is there a concept out there? And I know I've seen two aspects of this. One is I saw in Arizona people promoting this thing called fast track farming. It's basically in a much more artificial type environment with, UV lights, and stuff like this. It's what the pot guys do, right?
Yeah.
Some people are saying you take that same model and you use it to grow certain types of plants. It's much more, it's not a permaculture model. It's a reductionist model where you produce a lot of, let's say, some herbaceous plant, or let's say alfalfa or things like that. So that's one thing I've been seeing, which is to, and those people claim that this is what we need to do to stop the food security, The other model is you have these greenhouse sort of permaculture in a box. I don't know if you've seen this. So that, and the third one, and we'll come back to this. So we're in the Northeast, right? It's not, we have the 4 seasons here. I have a lawn, let's say about an acre, right? So, in the US, you have, the very, very sort of tropical cultures where you are, you have some arid places in Arizona, right? Deserts. And then you have the northern part, like in the Midwest, right? Which gets very cold. So on the first two things, what do you think about these fast track farming, where they're basically putting these UV lights and they feed them with nutrients and it's going to grow one kind of plant? And they claim, and their strategy is they're saying, okay, the farm animals don't have enough food, so we're going to just grow tons of alfalfa, non-GMO organic, so we can feed them. That's one claim. So I don't know if you've heard about those. What do you think about that?
Not only have I heard about it, I've, most of my life I was pretty ignorant. So I started a mortgage company. I did $1.3 billion in gross revenue in 3.5 years from scratch. I bought a boat, lived on the ocean for a year. I then moved to Costa Rica. I had my first 2 daughters, and I learned permaculture, and I red pilled all at the same time. And my mind,
right?
In Costa Rica, and my mind exploded.
Michelle, my partner, that's where she learned about permaculture, and there's been some of the best books that have come out of there. Okay, so that was your first place. Go ahead, continue. I'm sorry.
So what happened is, when I learned what was going on in the world, I had a lot of time. So I was 12 hours a day down every conspiracy theory rabbit hole, and I was obsessed with it in an unhealthy kind of way, because it blew my mind. And I recognized, for the sake of my daughters, that I had to use, the Napoleon Hill quote, "Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve." That stuck with me in a deep way. And then the Tesla thing: if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And except for the word think is misplaced. Don't think, but feel, right? So anyway, all these things started coming to me, and I started creating these fancy greenhouses. I was looking for a way around the system, and I realized it's all bullshit. The way we change the world is by following nature's design, or God's design, and we build soil. Now, I do love greenhouses. Greenhouses are fantastic, but they're not the answer. They're a part of the answer. I would say they're 10 to 20% at the most of the answer. The answer, the big answer, is to build soil and to put these guilds in the ground of diversity and to build life into every system.
Right. So let's take the Northeast, right? We're up in Massachusetts here, right? We have 4 seasons. So walk us through what you would do in a lawn of, 1 acre, knowing that you're going to get winter, you're going to get the fall, you're going to get spring. So obviously what you would do in Massachusetts or New England or Minnesota is a little bit different than what you do in Florida. So walk us
Yes.
through what you would do there. Yeah.
So we'd first say, what agricultural zone are you in? And then what microclimates might be present due to certain factors like lakes and ponds and maybe a rock face or something. And then we would design the land according, first of all, to what zone is it in? Because there are thousands of edible plants, most of which most people have no clue about or never heard about in every zone. In fact, my buddy in northern Minnesota has 300 different species of edible plants, and his food forest is 5 years old. It makes this one look like a baby. And there's so much excess food that comes in July, August, September, and October that's how it works in those areas. It's like an explosion of life, and then it goes dormant, and then it explodes again. So,
but when he
areas,
produces that food in October, then you said that's where he does the preservation during the winter time. Right.
Yes.
And then come spring, the things come back on their own.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Got it.
It's beautiful.
All right. That's pretty cool. So
yeah.
you figure out the nature of your particular zone, and then you support that nature with the right plants and the nature takes care of itself, and you feed the soil.
That's right. And again, I love to drive this point home because it's so profound. This is way less maintenance than a lawn, and I think it's infinitely more beautiful. Plus, it represents freedom for humanity.
Well, you know what's interesting, Jim? When I was 18, 19, 20, I bought my first home, and I would just let the lawn go crazy, and my neighbors would get so upset. And you had all these beautiful animals, everything would show up. The place that I live now, it's a very interesting community. It's there were two guys, a guy called Walter Gropius, you may know about him, and another guy called Carl Koch. These guys came out of the Bauhaus movement, which is about living in nature. And they built these 7 homes here. They look like sort of like the Frank Lloyd Wright homes, but and the goal was to live in sustainability with nature. So the homes here had cork floors, right? Everything was, and the homes were built in with the natural elements. That was the idea. So we now, over the years, the people that have moved here are sort of your neoliberals who like to live here, but they don't. And so there's a big open space here, probably about 10 acres.
Wow.
And the goal is we should just be growing stuff there. So it's interesting. These neoliberals talk about diversity and talk about sustainability, but they do not want that 10 acres to be used, which we could probably grow enough food for all of us. And that's part of, you see what I'm saying? So part of this is where the politics comes in, where you have people talking a game, but then when the rubber meets the road and you want to actually implement their game locally, you hit this dichotomy with what they say and what they actually want to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very interesting phenomenon that we see. So these people support like a permaculture farm for some poor people in Africa, but in their own backyard, they will not do it. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
This is what I cite. This is what I find so fucking ridiculous, because we have people right here who are your typical hippie liberals, but they will not. If you go to them and say, "Hey, why don't we take our 5 acres here and do permaculture?" What are you talking about? And they will make sure that's manicured. People are putting Roundup on it, all this crap. You see what I'm saying? But they at the same time will be talking about Costa Rican permaculture.
Yeah, I know.
So, you know what I'm saying, man? So this is where
we call their asses out.
We do.
How we do it. So everybody, this is what I recognized. Everybody can be inspired. And when somebody gets inspired, they cannot not do this, right? In fact, we just got a TV show funded thanks to my partner, Marcel. And it's to the tune of, millions of dollars. And it's going to be called probably Backyard Bounty or something. And it's going to be closing the loop. And maybe we can do a TV show in your yard. We can start the design process and we can show the world that you're actually doing it on every level that you become aware of to the max, because, well, that's it.
Yeah. So one thing I want to show you, Jim, this is interesting. Okay. So I think there's some interesting things we could do here. So in traditional systems of agriculture and medicine, let's say in the human body, in the ancient system of Ayurvedic or Siddha medicine,
Yeah.
They had a way of looking at you because you too are an ecosystem, and they had a way of characterizing your ecosystem. So obviously, if you're an Eskimo, you have a very different who you are versus if you're someone, a Maasai warrior versus someone who's living in Florida, right? And so they would look at you, they would understand your constitution and the environment which you were living in, and then they would figure out what were the right inputs for you, the right food, the right exercise, the right things for you.
Yeah.
That same systems approach you could also apply to the land, which is for this type of land, what are the right inputs for that and what are the right outputs? You follow? So I want to show you something. So when I finished my PhD in systems biology, I was very fascinated by this because my grandmother was a traditional healer, as I've shared before. And my grandparents were, farmers who practice all of these things you call regenerative farming and all that.
Yeah.
But what I realized was that the engineering systems principles, which govern systems, there's about 9 of them, they actually matched 1-to-1 with these ancient principles. Okay. Wow. And so I wrote a paper on this because I was fascinated because the Western world looks at these traditional systems of ways of looking at the world and they poo-poo them, right? Because they basically say, oh, these people were just tribals, what do they know? They're just, pagans, all this really, really negative stuff that's been done to, in fact, these people were ancient scientists in many ways. Yeah. So what ended up happening, Jim, was I took essentially that discovery that I made, and I used to teach a course on it, okay, which really integrated traditional systems of medicine with engineering system science. And I'll give you sort of the short version of it.
Okay.
So what that resulted in, I think you should be able to see this on your screen. What that resulted in was this very profound but scientific way of understanding integrating these two worlds. Okay. So I'll send you a copy of this, and everyone has access to it, on our Truth, Freedom, and Health platform. So I don't know if you can see this. So I wrote this in an engineering systems journal, Jim. You see, it's called the Systems of Systems Engineering. And basically this article goes through what are these traditional systems of medicine. Okay.
Wow.
All right. What is modern system biology? And it integrates it together. And I'll just take you to the punchline. And it gives the reader an ability to see that the ancient stuff talks about, this is a key thing here. Okay. Yeah. So these on the left column in table 6 here, Jim, you see these are the 9 principles of every system in the universe: input, output, movement, right? Of information, matter, and energy. Like in a farm, it's the wind, the conversion processes, right? How things grow, how the soil converts things, the storage, right? That's what a fruit is, right? A fruit or a potato, they store nutrients, right? Yeah. The goal, the controller, the sensor. Now, what I discovered was this is what you learn at MIT. These match 1-to-1 with the words that they use in traditional systems of medicine. Okay. Yeah. All right. So when my grandmother looked at you, she would say, oh, you have this much vata, pitta, and kapha, right? And she would figure out what was right for you. Karma really means input, karma, fall. Fall really means fruit, the fruit of that input. You see? Yeah. This framework you can use for understanding any system. And so what ended up happening was I built a tool which we give to all of our people go through our program, but it's called Be Happy, Be You. But it's a simple word, but you can answer a set of questions, Jim, and it figures out what kind of system you are. Wow. Okay. Yep. Within this framework. Then you answer a different set of questions, and it figures out how your system's off course, and it'll calculate for you what are the right foods, because a lot of people are lost touch with their intuition. Okay. Yeah. What are the right exercise, etc. Now, what I've wanted to do was to do the same for agriculture. You say, you look at a particular soil. I'm living in the Northeast. It'll calculate what kind of system that is, how that system's off course, right? You have a lawn and you've been putting all these poisons in, and what you need to do to bring it back on course. All right. Yeah. So there's an interesting thing that we can do here, because if we do this right, because I think part of what we did with that was to democratize all this ancient systems of knowledge. Because what they did was you have to go to India or you have to go to these gurus, and then they charge you a bunch of money and you have to bow at their feet. They make it very, very destructive to the average individual. So I've seen permaculture for the last, since 1990, have a lot, but What's happened is it hasn't scaled for some reason, right? You go to Costa Rica or you go somewhere, people learn it. And it's always remained in sort of a finite set of people. And I think there's a way to scale this. And, you know, my running for president was really about bringing solutions and democratizing this. So we should talk about it offline. I have some thoughts on how we could take what you're doing, some of these systems approaches, and bringing them together. So you essentially help people crank it much faster. You say?
Yeah. Yes.
Open source. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That is what I've been focused on, taking the same scale like I created in the mortgage company and doing the same scale here. And we've just proved, like literally over the last couple of months, now we've created such a business model that has created such incredible energy that now we've got food forests going in all the communities around here because of this. So this became and is a seed of infinite exponential abundance that is now creating all these other seeds of abundance, which is creating more seeds of abundance, and we're going to change the world.
That's awesome.
So I love your thinking. I love systems. Everything you talk about, the system stuff, is exactly, so the answer is a big yes.
Yeah. So Jim, let's do a follow-up on this, but I think two opportunities we have is physically something, because think about this, Massachusetts is sort of the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
And you have the center of Harvard, MIT, all these organizations which talk a big game. It's your typical center of the neoliberal elite. They talk all this stuff. They sort of make it a very bougie thing to go to Costa Rica and learn this. You see what I'm saying? But they will not do it in their own backyard. So one area is to do it right here. The other area is to, you know, I know people in New York are doing these farms, you know, on top of rooftops. Okay. And, but the concept of doing on lawns makes sense. The other thing is I also have an opportunity we should pursue halfway around the world in India. We can do in a place called Chennai in South India. Okay. There's about 40 acres we should talk about there, because India actually is at this very interesting inflection point. India actually has all these infrastructure set up, but the Western influence could make them go in this wackadoodle way to go do big ag. You see, and that to me, that's going to destroy the country. They won't be able to do it. So there's an opportunity to do this stuff in some of these countries where they're at that inflection point where they can go in that direction or they can go into the darkness. And so doing this in places like that, I think can set models, because India has 1.6 billion people, 300 to 400 million people in India are middle class. And there's a growing awareness that they do not want these ancient systems destroyed, but they're under massive pressure, you see, to destroy these ancient systems. So I'm saying that culturally, they already have the momentum to do the right thing, but they're also under this huge force to do the wrong thing because there's so much money behind it.
That's it. So when we put up demonstration sites and then invite people, I do tours all the time here. And when we invite people to take a tour, they will leave a changed person. It will literally change their life. And then when we demonstrate that it's in their best interest. And by the way, I just want to throw out the whole climate change bullshit narrative. This solves that fake narrative. If that narrative were real, this would be the solution to that narrative. So it's a good thing to throw in their face to say, oh, really? Well, why don't we sequester carbon by putting more fruit trees in the ground, which also takes the food supply chain from 1,500 miles to your backyard, right? And all that. So anyway, so the answer is a big yes. I'm in.
Well, the big thing is that climate change stuff, as you know, is just garbage. It's really promoted to centralize energy production. That's what it's really about. So we don't decentralize it, energy production.
And to create the carbon economy, it's bullshit.
Right, but you can really control people because they want to have the carbon tax connected to your cell phone, connected to centralized digital bank currencies. And again, this is another thing Booby effing Kennedy promoted. He promoted the lockdowns. He said they were good because they supported climate change. So I think the big thing, Jim, is to recognize that we know what needs to be done. The biggest thing stopping it is not the obvious establishment, but the not so obvious establishment of the neoliberals where I live, people like Kennedy, people like Hillary Clinton, these people who claim they want to do it. They actually take these ideas, they talk about it, but nothing ever happens. And my view is the only way that we're going to be able to scale the deployment of these is through, you know, where the solutions become accessible to large numbers of people in an easy way and becomes part of a movement. It has to be both a political movement, a food movement, a health movement, all of it. But without that, it's only going to be isolated, and people will have their martinis and they'll come to these things and they'll talk about it and they'll write about it, but it's never going to scale. So in order to scale it, you need a very powerful bottoms-up movement. So
I couldn't agree more. And I'm happy to say that it is scaling now just in the last, I would say, two, 3 quarters. It's now scaling exponentially. And with your help and with some other, which will bring in these key influencers and strategists. And this is the idea whose time has come, stronger than all of the armies of the world. It's unstoppable and it's nature. It's so, it's so much fun too.
That's great, Jim. So let's do a follow-up. I think you have my phone number and all. Let's do a follow-up. But it would be, let's do a follow-up. I have some thoughts on it. But anyway, Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
I'm glad Todd and Mike connected us.
Me too.
But I'm glad you're also, you know, moringa is a great, great plant, you know? It's an incredible plant. I'm glad you have it there. And to people who don't know about it, everyone should study it. Thanks, Jim. Awesome. Be well, be the light. Thank you.
You too.
Well.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yep. Let me bring here.